Hey gang, and welcome to another episode of Try Not to Curse. This one I have been working on for quite some time. My friend Ryan is joining us. I have known him since the second grade. And the last time we got together, it was a couple of years back. It was before you had your child. And it was at a holiday party at your house. And I think we did the math and you were like, we've known each other 23 years or something like that. So I'm not going to do the math now, but we're both 40. We're both 40.
Yeah.
Which is, how did that happen? How did we get here? But so Ryan is a person that has been in my life. He is the person that we first bonded over fandom together. You're my first fandom friend. We played X-Men at recess and we talked about Star Trek: The Next Generation, which is still my favorite of all the series. And I have since met almost every member of TNG, which is really exciting. Sir Patrick Stewart is my white whale. It's never going to happen, unfortunately. But anyway, but so I have known Ryan.
That's awesome.
You guys,
I know that.
Yeah. So I have known Ryan for quite. I have been in the same room as him. I have breathed the same air as him. I have just never had the opportunity to look him in the eye and tell him how much I love him and how I wish he could live forever. But I was thinking about this today because I was going back through your second book, and we're going to go off on tangents. It's going to be a whole thing. I'm going to try and keep it to an hour, but it might be very difficult. Ryan have you written 2 books now, or are there more books that we have written? It's 2 that are out.
I have put out into the world 2 books.
Okay. So we're going to talk about the Ashes.
I've written significantly more than that.
Okay. I was going to say, there's no way. So that we're going to talk about the Ashes of Allur-tan, the Embers of Allur-tan. But when I was going back through just to kind of, refresh my memory on the stories, you have the most extensive vocabulary of any human being I have said this literally as long as I have known you. And I'm looking through and I'm like, there are words I have never heard of in my fucking life. And I don't know where you come up with these things. But I vividly remember in high school when Dawson's Creek came out, I'm watching that show and I'm like, first of all, nobody fucking talks like this. Nobody our age talks like this, has that, and goes through a thesaurus like this, has this vernacular. And yet, Ryan McClure, you are the only person I know that could go toe to toe with Dawson and probably school him, honestly. So if you guys want to learn some new vocab words, buy Ryan's books, if for nothing else, because truly, I'm going through and I'm like, the fuck, where, how, so again, we're going to go all the way back to the beginning, but for the sake of this part of the conversation, do you use a thesaurus while you're writing, or do you literally just have this shit in your brain? Which I bet you do, because you're crazy.
What you end up reading is usually the 3rd or 4th or 5th draft.
Okay, sure.
So there are many times while writing where if I run into a snag, I know a word for this exists, and I don't remember what it is right now, I will put square brackets and say, word that means this, and come back to it later.
I dig that.
So I would say it's about 50-50. It's about 50-50. Some of those, words I genuinely use, and other people are like, where do you come up with that? And then there are other words I'm like, I know there's a word for this. I don't know what it is. It's going to disrupt my flow if I stop to look it up. So just bracket it and move on.
Well, okay. So once you look it up, though, does it then become a part of your vernacular? You're like, okay, I'm going to start using this more, or no, just for the books?
Sometimes.
Okay.
I have been made aware by friends and coworkers and other folks that have read the books that I do have a $10 word tendency.
Yes.
As one of my friends puts it.
Absolutely.
And
no, I love it though.
I love it. Barrier. I don't want it to be a barrier to people.
No, but it's really not though, because you definitely use it in a way that makes sense in the context. It makes sense in that sentence. So even though it's a word I've never seen before in my life, I know what you're saying. So it's like, oh shit, that's a new way to say that. Again, not that I can remember any of them off the top of my head, or that I'll actually use them in my own, verbiage one day. But it was I'm reading it and I'm like, this fucking guy, because it's great. But we'll go back. So you've been a voracious reader your whole life. I do remember that. You love reading, you love story. At what point did you say, I've got a story that I want to tell, and I need to put pen to paper, and I need to start writing. Have you always been writing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like my parents love to talk about, they still have saved printouts from, old DOS 386 computers where I'd be writing in whatever the heck word processor it was back in those days. And it would be like, a page or a page and a half of the beginning of a story. And they would always be like, well, what happens next? I'm like, I don't know. I got bored. And I would never come back.
I will say, I think you were
starter and terrible finisher. So.
But I will say, I think you were also the first person I knew that had an at-home personal computer. Like you were always,
really?
I think so. Like you were always like on top of technology in your house. And like I said, always reading. You always had a vocab that was larger than anyone else's. But like, just like me, like you love to talk, like you love to conversate, you love to debate, you love to, look at things from 20 different angles, which is what I've always appreciated about you. But you didn't go to school for writing. You didn't go to school to be an author. Nope. What was it that you wanted to do and that you are doing now?
Well, so my path was kind of weird. I guess probably everybody's path is weird, but I kind of started out thinking I would do something in film.
Okay.
Right? Was it going to be an actor? Was it going to be a director? Was it going to be a screenplay writer? Something, you and I have both always loved movies and TV and stuff like that. And I was like, this is my jam. I want to do this. And somewhere along the way in high school or maybe middle school, God, I don't even remember anymore. Somewhere in there, I saw the kind of very, very new and at the time quite limited field of amateur visual effects, 3D modeling and stuff. It was something you would see in big films, but not something you see hobbyists doing until suddenly, now the internet's here and people are like, hey, look at my thing that I made. And I go, you can do that? And so then I started getting into visual effects and pursuing, 3D modeling and animation and stuff like that. And got to the point where I was making short films. I don't know if you remember any of those from high school. We had history classes where I would exhibit a film, with other classmates and stuff. We would make a film in my basement. Not basement, it was downstairs, but with a green screen that was made of just a giant piece of green fabric.
Yeah. You proposed to your wife with a little kind of cartoon.
I did. Yep. I made a little animation, 3D animation of myself arguing with myself. Proposed to my wife. And then took an episode we had downloaded of House, because we had been watching House at the time, and about 15 minutes in the episode I cut that in abruptly. So we sat down to watch House for the evening. She had no idea it was coming, and then all of a sudden, I think Wilson says some line, and then it cuts to black, and then my voice kicks in, and she's like, "What is this? What are you doing?" She figured it out very quickly because she's quite smart. So I went to school for that animation stuff. Picked Northeastern specifically because they were using Lightwave, which was the package that I was very into at the time.
Okay.
The year I got there, they switched to another package called Maya.
Oh.
So I was like, bait and switch. But it was fine. I picked up Maya pretty quick. I dabbled in it before a little bit. And underneath the hood, all these packages are kind of the same thing anyway. You have to learn where stuff is. And while at Northeastern, I met the guy who was the manager for the art department at a company called Blue Fang Games. And also during college, I got kind of bigger into video gaming in general.
Sure.
Video gaming was getting more and more story oriented, and story is kind of where I live. I'm like, wait a minute, what if I could tell story through games? And I just kind of complete pivoted from visual effects over to game stuff, game development. So I went to work for Blue Fang while I was still in school, graduated, still worked there. And then Blue Fang kind of imploded, as so many game studios do.
Sure.
Got referred by that same art manager to another place that has since become quite infamous called 38 Studios, which was Kurt Schilling's attempt at running a game company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that one, where I got hired there as a tech artist, worked there until that company fell apart, much to, I think, all of our collective heartbreak, because the game we worked on was just absolutely gorgeous. It'll never see the light of day now, which sucks. But decided that I'd had enough of, and that was just 2 studios, but I had enough of studios getting shot out from under me. and said, okay, I'm going to go do something else. I'm not going to do this anymore. And it was while I was working at 38 that Ashes came out.
Okay.
So that was kind of going on in parallel.
Yeah.
And I think my kind of discontent with the game industry drove that a little bit. It's like, okay, well, I'll keep on here as long as here is a thing, but I'm going to start trying to tell my own stories in my own way, and some way that I fully control.
Now, how hard was that, though? How hard was writing a story while having a full-time job? You know, you're married, you've got, life is still going on around you. Were you, I would imagine it's kind of something that you obsess over, that you're thinking about all the time. Because you're world building. Where is this character from? What's his backstory? What are they going to do? What's the next move? And then all the other characters are around them. How difficult was that? Right? You know, really writing, like deciding, and then really sitting down and writing your first book.
Well, so Ashes had the benefit of being my second attempt to write a book.
Okay.
The first attempt was the previous year. So I wrote the first draft of Ashes in 2009. I wrote the first book ever in 2008.
Okay.
You know, and a lot of this has been driven by committing to doing National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo. And the first book was a nano book. Ashes was a nano book. I made 2 attempts in 2010 to write another book, and they both kind of stalled out. Knocked out another book in 2011. I think the next one, what was the timing on that? Knocked out the first draft of the next book in 2013, and then also wrote the first draft of Embers in 2013.
Okay.
That was a great year. I don't know if I finished that in 2013, but anyway. But yeah, Nano has actually been kind of behind the launch of a lot of these, just because it gives you a target. It's like, here, you start on this day, and by this day you better hit 50,000 words, and if you don't, you didn't win.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. That's really interesting. And I would imagine that keeps people motivated.
Yeah, it's a huge motivator. And you know me being all obsessive and data driven and all that sort of stuff. So I would have spreadsheets. I'd be tracking my
and
chart.
competitive.
Like, how many words do I have to write to? Absolutely. I mean, it's self-competitive. You're not really competing against other people, but it gives you a metric to be like, okay, the expectation is you write this many words per day, and if you don't hit that, the next day you got to write that many more.
Right.
And so Nano has been great for just providing a semi-external. What's the word I'm looking for? Just kind of, angel on the shoulder being like, hey, did you do your writing? Did you do your writing?
Right.
And the years are like, well, I'm not going to do Nano this year. Well, guess what? Nothing got written that year.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
Nothing new got written that year.
Well, so what is your writing style? Because I have always heard time and time again, and I've reiterated this myself to people when they talk about like, I want to write, but I don't know how to get started. I've always heard people say, just start. Just whatever it does. You can start in the middle of the story. It doesn't matter. Or how the story ends, then start there and work backwards. It doesn't matter. Just, you've got ideas, put pen to paper, or type it out, whatever. But just start. And then from there you can build. Like, are you like that? Or do you kind of have like an outline, or, like you've got a list of character names, and you know what I mean? Like, do you kind of know what direction you want to go in when you start? Like, I remember the last time I saw you were saying you had started thinking about like some sci-fi novels, some sci-fi books.
Yep.
So do you always have something kind of in the back of your mind, or is it one of those where you're like, I like the name of this character. Let's see who they are and what kind of life they live. Like, how do you get started?
It's a little of all of that. The advice, just start, is absolutely vital. Like, that is the truest advice that someone can give. And for someone who hasn't started, it may sound like shitty advice, but it really is the truth. You just have to sit down in your chair, open up that blank page that's the most intimidating thing in the universe, and start writing something. Yeah. And the other secret that really, really got me over the hump was, everybody's first draft is trash. It's just trash.
Absolutely.
Expect to throw it away.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Nobody has to see it but you. It is your it is the thing that gives you permission to write the next draft, the better draft. And like that first book that I mentioned writing, it will never see the light of day. It's absolute garbage.
Aw.
And no matter how much polishing it gets, it will never not be garbage. To give you, just to give some insight to why, that book somehow ended up with a very like pro-corporate message.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how that happened because that's not me.
No, not at all.
At all. I'm like, what happened here? How did I get? And that's my exact. Gee, the first draft can be trash. It's okay. You can just throw it away. And a lot of people hear that and they're like, well, I spent so much time working on it, and then I don't want to throw all that effort away. It's like, how old are you going to be in a year if you don't write it?
Right. Right. Well, and also like you said, like, sure, that's not going to see the light of day, but it's a jumping off point. It's a starting point. Okay, I have written that. I know what mistakes I made. I know what direction I want to go in this time. I know how I want to do it better, more efficient, what have you. So I would at that point I would like. And I've talked about this in the past with some folks on the pod as well. Like failure is a big, you feel like if I didn't publish it, if I didn't finish it, if I didn't show this to anyone, then it's a failure. It's like, well, no, it's like you said, it's a draft. It's a draft. It's a starting off point. Yeah. And I think as a society, we're so quick to get down on ourselves when we feel like we haven't accomplished a goal or we haven't met a challenge. And in reality, it's literally just a jumping off point to the next thing.
Yeah.
So
and it's true of any kind of creative endeavor as well. At least I think it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be creative. Any endeavor where you're building a skill, it's you look at someone who is wildly successful, and what you see is the product of all of the work they put in to get to that.
100%.
You don't see all the work. You just see the product of that work.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I could never paint as well as Leonardo da Vinci. It's like, do you know how much Leonardo da Vinci painted to get there? Because it was a lot. And you're talking about the first painting you've ever tried being, not good. It's like, well, neither was his.
Right. Well, and so Ryan Reynolds actually just in an interview had said he tells his daughters all the time, he was like, if you want to be good at anything, you have to prepare to also fail at the same thing. Like you have to to be as equally bad at something as you will be good, because you need to understand both sides of it. And again, you need to make those mistakes so that you can learn from them and decide, okay, we don't want to keep going down this path. So I think that's really important. Whereas again, people kind of tend to use it as a crutch and as an excuse. It's like, oh, well, it sucks, so I'm done. Like, well, no, the first endeavor, Ed Sheeran famously plays some of like his first songs that he ever wrote, and they sound shit, and he sounds shit, and you're like, how the fuck does this guy now sell millions of albums and tour regularly? And it's like, you got to start somewhere. So I appreciate you saying that, but again, I'm also like, I'm such a huge fan of your work, and my mom loves your books. Like the moment I got Embers, my mom was like, well, you better let me can I tell you, my mom has a Beanie Baby in her car, and I don't know if it's a bat or if it's a flying squirrel. I can't remember, but she named it Finton after your character.
Oh, amazing.
She treasures this Beanie Baby. Like during the day, she puts like a napkin over it so that the sun won't like bleach the thing. Like I'm telling you. So we love your characters. We love your story. Tell my listeners, all 5 of them, what your books are about.
Well, okay. So Aller-tan, the Aller-tan series, the trilogy, the 3rd book is in process. Centers on a fellow named Finton, and he's dead, and yet still has adventures. And
would we call him a zombie? Would we classify him as a zombie?
We would call him a Faithar Gumgar, because that's what he is.
I should also mention Ryan has his own language in the books, so. And he's the only one that can pronounce anything properly, which is also kind of fun.
Hey, I put a pronunciation guide in the back.
Yeah, because you'll say things and I'll be like, oh, that's how that's said. Okay, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Now the real trick is getting me to say it twice and see how different the 2 different pronunciations are. If I get it consistent, then that's the canonical pronunciation.
All right. See, there's the $10 vocab again.
Finton is brought back by a mad wizard and comes to find out that because of the nature of his return, not only is he alive once more, not only is he effectively immortal because of it, he has an absurd ability to channel magic that no one else does because he is literally sustained by it. And this gets him into no small amount of trouble. He goes on. He flees the wizard and runs into some companions along the way, an elf named Buck and an ogre named Stone, neither of whom I deliberately wanted to fit the expected archetype of what an elf or an ogre is. So Buck is short, fiery, cannon-wielding, short-tempered. That's what fiery means. Just little what's the term? See, this is where I would go with brackets in writing.
That's okay.
It's disrupting the flow. But you've already got the impression.
She's a spitfire.
And Stone, she's a spit. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Fiery, short temper. What's the word for that? Spitfire. Yes, that's exactly what I was looking for.
Yes.
And Stone is an erudite ogre of quite mild manner who is interested in defusing situations and addressing things politically and smoothing things over and engaging in philosophical discussions.
When I first read Stone in Ashes ofAlour-tan, I read him like Fraser Crane. Like that was his voice to me at the time. Not now. Again, rereading, going back over Embers, but at the time, that's kind of how I read. And I think I might have been watching Frasier at the time, so I think that's part of it. But he's very mild mannered. He cares a lot about educating himself. He speaks multiple languages. He's not what anybody would consider an ogre to be from what we've seen in movies and TVs and other stories. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so the genesis of Ashes, it came from two things. The first was just a single scene that I wrote, which was the scene of Fenton's resurrection, which never actually made it into the book. That was in the first draft and the second draft, and I was like, this is just not grabbing. It's important to me because it was the first scene I came up with, but it didn't really feel like a good intro into the book. And so, I went back to well, how did the greats do it? And Tolkien started off with in the hole in the ground lived a hobbit. So I was like, okay, well, Fenton spent his days in a magical tower reading about magical things, and that's where the first actual line of Ashes came from. But it came from this one page, just kind of chronicle of Fenton being resurrected and Daewin being there talking to him about it, and Fenton kind of confronting the horror of what he had become. And it set a very different tone than the tone I kind of ultimately wanted to go for when I got to the end of the book. I was like, oh, this is the story I was telling. Okay. And then the other guiding principle was, okay, every time you introduce some fantasy element, you have to flip it on its head. So Fenton is the hero. He's dead. Yeah.
And kind of like
he starts out dead.
Yeah.
And yes, and then grows more alive as the story goes. Buck is an elf. Okay, well, elves are not going to be people that lurk in trees and are one with the forest and use bows and arrows. They are going to be the industrialists. They are still going to be long-lived, but it's going to be all messed up and backwards, and they're going to seem like children to humans for the longest time. It's just going to be weird. And we're not going to explain how elf technology works because don't worry about it. That's what they tell everybody else anyway, so don't worry about it. Then we get to needing someone who's a sort of the mild-mannered intermediary. Well, let's make him an ogre. He's going to be an ogre. Ogres are going to be polite and interested in politics and diplomacy. That's what ogres are going to be in this story. And then we get to the dwarves, and now they're going to be the ones who are attuned with nature, and they're going to be completely incomprehensible and have this entire different outlook. And so the working draft name for Ashes was actually Misfits.
Okay. Yeah.
It wasn't misfit characters, but it was like misfit tropes. Like the tropes just right. Flip all the tropes that you normally run into and see where it goes. And you were asking about process earlier, and process for me has changed from book to book. And I don't know that I could actually point to having a consistent process at this point. But the process for Ashes was what scene do I want to write next? Okay, write that scene till it gets boring. Once it gets boring, stop writing it. Go to the next scene.
Okay. I dig that, though.
And
you want to keep it exciting.
Yeah, that's just keep it exciting for me. Because if I'm not excited, then the reader's not going to be excited.
Yeah.
And because where's the fun in that? So yeah, Ashes was very much written from a perspective of what's the next scene that's interesting to me? What do I want to talk about next? What do I want to see from these characters next? And once I followed that path all the way to the end of the book, I said, oh, I've just told the whole story here. Well, let me go back now and make this story make a little more sense.
Yeah, put it all together. Right. Yeah.
So my drafts end up being kind of weird because partly I think because of Nano, but the first draft for Ashes was around 50-ish thousand words, the Nano target. And then the second draft ballooned up to something like 95,000.
Okay.
It was almost twice as long.
Yeah.
And then the final manuscript ended up being around 80,000, I think.
Okay.
That chopped a bunch of stuff back.
Yeah.
But a lot of that was exploring okay, well, where is this going and how does it come together and how does it make more sense and how does it flow and how do I set up, some foreshadowing and keep a consistent set of themes going and stuff like that. But all that comes later. All of that comes later, man. You don't think about any of that crap up front.
And as you're writing, do you already have the expectation of a second book, of continuing the story? Like, do you purposely limit yourself in that one draft thinking, okay, I can continue the story elsewhere. Like, let's not make it, a 5-inch thick novel. Let's round off this story, make it make sense. And then we can, whatever else I have brewing, I can write the next book. Or are we not thinking in those terms at that point?
For Ashes originally, I kind of left a sequel hook at the end and on purpose without necessarily the intent that I was definitely going to follow it up.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, the Finton's adventures have come to a conclusion for now, but they could go on. He's, taking his steps into a larger world, to quote Obi-Wan Kenobi. And we can see where that goes or not. It doesn't matter at this point. And then once I started writing Embers, I'm like, okay, I have a sense of where this is going. I have a sense of where this whole set of stories needs to end up. And Embers was kind of the bridge to get there. It's a self-contained story unto its, in its own right, but it also is much more explicit. The entire epilogue basically being like, look, here's what happened after all that mess.
Yeah.
Surprise.
Yeah. I love the way the book started because it was you introduced a whole new character on page 1, and I started reading it. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, like this is not. It didn't feel like an immediate continuation of the first book. Right. And I was like, Mr. McClure, I'll tell you what, you know what you're doing, sir. Because you grabbed me right away. I was like, who the hell is this? Hold on a minute. And how do they fit into the rest of the story? So that was really cool. Nice job there, sir.
I don't think Alexis's chapter was the first chapter initially either. That's just another case of like reworking things to be like, wait a minute.
Well, and again,
what's going to be the most interesting thing for a reader coming into the book?
Right. Well, and again, because life happens, you're writing around your schedule. You're writing when it's convenient for you. So you're not going to be able to, like, it's not like you're locking yourself in a room for a month, 2 months, whatever, and dedicating your entire life to this project. So it makes sense that it might be a little scattered here because, oh, you've got a thought and hold on, let me write that down quick and then find a way to connect it later on. I mean, I have said that time and time again, even with this podcast, like my biggest issue is scheduling because we all have lives. We're not, I wish I could dedicate my life to this podcast, but that would also mean making sure all of my guests are available when I need them. And that's just not plausible. That's just not the real world. So it makes sense that sometimes you get a little scattered and you have to, once, like you said, once it's all down, then you have to make sense of it and put it all together. And damn it, sir, I think you've done quite a good job doing that with your 2 stories so far. My mom's going to be so excited to hear that there's a third book. Oh my goodness, this is great.
Oh yes, there has been a third book for a long time. It's just been in not development hell, but kind of. Part of the problem is I've had to plan for the third book for a really long time, and I know how the third book ends, and I have known how the third book ends for a very long time.
Sure.
And that has been an amazing demotivator to writing. It's like, I know where this is going already, so I've kind of basically done it already, right?
Right.
Well, no, but your brain kind of gets fooled into thinking that, and you don't get any of the endorphins and dopamine hits from getting the accomplishment itself.
And now you're self-published as well, is that right? Or did you go through?
Yes.
Okay. So
No,
what's
that
process like though? Because we were talking with Catherine and Rhea a little bit about their book, and now I'm going to be talking to them next week about their follow-up. But I mean, it's kind of a weird thing because it is you, but you still have to answer to some, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to properly express it, but what's the experience been like for you doing that and going through that initially? Like, you know, it's your first venture. How do you, where do you go? How do you just Google, how do I publish my book? Like, how do you?
Honestly, kind of.
Okay.
It was a little more complex than that. I once I realized I had something that I was actually interested in putting out into the world, I said, okay, well, what am I going to do that? Am I going to go find an agent and get a publisher and all that sort of stuff? I know self-publishing is a thing. Is that worth looking into?
Right.
I know there's like small house print runs that you could look into and self-finance. And I was like, well, what are the options out there? And in the late aughts, back when I was, is that the right phrase?
Yeah.
Is that what the kids call it these days? In the late aughts, when I was looking into this, the prevailing wisdom was you can make a pretty decent living self-publishing if your catalog is big enough. You don't even have to charge very much per book because people, if they like your stuff, will be like, oh, well, that was good. What else you got?
Right.
And come to find out, that's honestly kind of true for most, publishing house published authors as well. Is the larger their catalog, the more money they're making, with the exception of the big New York Times bestsellers, which is its own world entirely.
Right.
You can't really plan for that. So looking into the various options and looking at some of the success stories and how they had achieved that success, and trying to be very pragmatic about it, I said to myself, well, I would much rather be the one in charge of making the decisions and just have to work through a platform that I'd upload stuff to and then it is there, than trying to go through the layers of abstraction required to go to a major publisher. Could Ashes have been published by a major publisher? I have no idea. The people who have read it have enjoyed it, so that's great, and that's all I really care about. And having done self-publishing, I Stephen King, I hope it was, said something to the effect of, if someone has paid you for something you wrote, congratulations, you're a professional author. And so I have used, if someone paid you for something you wrote and then you used that money to pay bills or something to that effect, like the check cleared was, I think, his actual language, but I have used earnings from the books to pay bills. I can actually say that. So there you go.
That's pretty awesome.
But that's a meandering way to get to the idea. Yes, I pursued self-publishing because it seemed to me to give me more control and get the book out there in the world faster.
Okay.
And it didn't feel necessary to try to pursue grander horizons and get an advance and earn against the advance for royalties and never see the royalties because you never earned out the advance. And that's the typical publishing model. And I think partly soured by just experiences in the game industry too, because the game industry profit model is very similar. A publisher will advance a game studio a certain amount of money to make the game, and then the game would come out and sell X million copies and not earn back that money. Okay. And then the studio would get no royalties from it at all.
Wow. Okay.
And it sucks. It's publishing, it's book publishing, but at a much larger scale that can't be sustained. And I think I was very soured on that approach and just you know what, I'm not doing that. I will happily accept the trickle in of individual royalties from sales and call that a day and not worry about it.
Yeah. Well, and again,
I toyed with the idea of maybe pursuing an agent for when book 3 eventually is done.
I mean, I think you should
trilogy.
like I think about, there are now these book conventions, even Comic-Con itself. They have Barnes and Noble always has like a little table set up of books that you guys might enjoy. There might be something in here, and there's always new titles that, like, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, you could totally sell books at Comic-Con. Like, you could absolutely, and then you can come sign them next year or something. So I think you absolutely, because again, I love the books. And I think they're so appealing, especially to my Comic-Con nerdy friends. Maybe I should start sending some books to some of my nerdy friends. But so I could totally see that happening for sure. So where was I going? This happens all the time. I apologize, my brain.
Oh man, same.
But again, Catherine and Rhea had said the same thing. Like they have their full-time job, they have degrees, they went into the profession of that they wanted to pursue, and writing for them was just for funsies. It was one of those like, hey, I think we could do this, and let's put some ideas together. And again, now they have book 2 coming out. They're probably going to keep going, but they went into it knowing full well we're not going to be millionaires off of this. Like you said, maybe we'll pay a handful of bills. If anything, we might just even out, and it might pay for what we put into it, what have you. And same thing with me with this podcast. I just started because this is for me. If I get one listener, amazing. If it turns into anything more, even better. I'd love a sponsorship. But it's we creative types, as they would say, we have to put out. We have to. We can't. You can't help yourself. You just can't contain it. Like I said, it kind of becomes an obsession. So how many stories do you have going in your brain right now? So you said you've got the 3rd book going, but you've said you've written plenty of things that we're never going to see.
Yep. So one of
I feel like this is like torture. Like.
It's funny because you mentioned the scheduling thing earlier, and then the creative constant drive to produce output, to produce something that I've short-circuited it lately. Ever since Embers came out, honestly, I've short-circuited it by running a bunch of D&D games.
Okay.
And that requires constant world building and constant storytelling and constantly coming up with new characters to run these games. And it took me a long time to get to the point of, okay, I have expended enough of my creative resources on those games that they don't require the same level of continued creative maintenance to keep them going and keep the next thing happening. And that's when I started having the energy again to, okay, well, now I can start on really getting book 3 going, really getting back into the swing of things. But I did some research prior to the show today, and God bless, pulled up the list of when I wrote what. And Embers came out in 2016 is when I started really getting back into D&D again. Yeah. And nothing's come out since. So it's interesting because it has short-circuited it for me. It had become the creative outlet. I was constantly entertaining people who I've cared very deeply about, and then was telling them a story essentially, and they were telling me a story along at the same time. Yeah. And we were doing it together, and that was so creatively enriching for that pretty long stretch there that I just didn't have enough additional oomph to be like, oh, I also have to write these other stories. Yeah.
Do you like all storytelling? I've known you as the sci-fi guy, as the fantasy guy. We grew up, you watched Babylon 5, you watched Farscape, we watched Star Trek TNG, we watched Firefly. But for me, I'm into storytelling periods. Any documentary you put in front of me, I love. It's fascinating. I love people's stories. But is there a particular reason that you gravitate more towards fantasy and sci-fi rather than, nonfiction or is there ever going to be a moment where you sit down and you're like, I want to write a historical piece and then have to do all this research to, you know what I mean? Because that to me sounds like there's actually a documentary that I am trying to put together that I've spoken with producer Mike about. However, the problem is the research that I would have to, you've got to back up what you're trying to say and give statistics and give numbers. And in 1962, it was like this. And now here we are. I have the people to interview, but I need all the bullshit facts to fill in between. And that's the thing kind of holding me back, because that part sucks. So like for you, like, is it better to just come up with your own stuff, or have you considered like one particular subject matter to kind of to sit down and write about? I mean, I feel like everything's been written about at this point, but is there anything else that interests you outside of that?
To answer that last part first, there's a old saying that all stories have already been told.
Yeah, that's true.
And it is true. All stories have been told in some form or another. But I also very strongly believe that each person who tells a story brings their own spin to it. So just because this particular story, can be said to have been told before, no one has told it like this before.
Sure.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that does contribute to the world of the body of storytelling in general. To walk back one level, whatever. Yeah, part of it is definitely you feel a little less beholden to making sure you get everything right if it is your own world.
Yeah, they can't fact check your fantasy world, right?
Well, until you have enough stuff written for your fantasy world that someone can say, "Wait a minute, on page 237 you said this, but in this book you said that."
Yes.
It's like, well,
we have that we have that conversation a lot on the YouTube show I'm a part of about canon versus added stuff. Mm-hmm. Jesus Christ. Listen, if I'm ever at that part where I can, that's not canon, that's not true, like, just blow my brains out, because God's sakes, people, get a life. There's too many other things going on in the world, I swear. But there are the diehards that are like that. I
had to go back and change because I was like, wait a minute, I said this in Ashes. Oh no, I better fix this.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
So
you want to be consistent.
But to the same point, like I did dig into a pretty lengthy science fiction story in 2013, just before switching gears and starting on Embers, that the initial seed idea, just like Ashes was, Misfits, the initial seed idea is, what if you took the prime directive from Star Trek at face value and literally as like the most important axiom, and what kind of society and spacefaring civilization would that give rise to? What kind of hard decisions would you find yourself having to make? So on and so forth.
Well, tell my listeners what that is actually, because people who aren't Star Trek fans.
To broadly paraphrase, the prime directive in Star Trek is the idea of a advanced spacefaring civilization like the Federation, to which our heroes inevitably belong, should not get involved in the development of societies that have not reached that level of spacefaring capability yet, because it will unduly pollute the way that species was otherwise going to reach that inevitable destination. There's a lot to be said.
But isn't like one of the main drivers, like, once they can reach warp drive, like basically once they're capable of space travel, then we can make ourselves known.
Once they're going to run into you anyway, then you can make contact.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So that in there are plenty of Star Trek episodes that deal with the idea of, we're going to have to violate the prime directive to make sure this doesn't happen, or make sure this does happen.
Right.
And they ultimately play fast and loose with it. It's a convenient story device when it's convenient, and when it's not, we just forget about it.
Certainly in Enterprise when it's all new to them. Yeah.
And so the idea behind this science fiction story was, okay, what if I did take that literally? What if it was like an ironclad axiom that you couldn't violate? And if it got violated, what measures did you have to go to enforce it, essentially? It was kind of like a darker turn on the idea of the prime directive.
Yeah.
And for that, I developed my ideas for what the science fiction, the science behind the science fiction was going to be like. And I did end up doing a whole lot of probably entirely unnecessary research on various things like the tensor field equations for Einstein metrics of space-time to determine, I had all sorts of stuff. I had papers and papers and papers of things.
But it's true, though, you have to.
Because I wanted to. Yeah, you have to a point.
Yeah.
You have to the point where if you
Unless it's completely
consistent with
makeup,
it.
unless it's complete fantasy that has no basis in reality. Because, you know, I think about like Neil deGrasse Tyson all the time when he saw Titanic and he was like, those stars aren't the right stars for that time of year and for the position of where the boat was and da-da-da. And it's like, holy fuck, bro, take a day off. Like, oh my God. But it's true. Then
Jim Cameron went and fixed it.
Well, yes, but those are the kinds of things that you have to kind of think about, because you're here to just tell a story. But eventually somebody's going to come along and be like, excuse me, sir, that actually is not the way that works. And it's like, well, fuck, like, I'm not a scientist. I'm just, I want to tell a story. So it is tricky, I think, depending on the genre. You kind of have to walk that fine line.
To some extent.
Yeah.
Because the world you're telling the story in is part of the story.
Right.
And if you're not being authentic about the world, I'm not saying you have to be like hardcore, exactly real, but authentic. The word gets thrown around a lot as verisimilitude.
Okay, I don't. By whom?
$10 word.
Who is throwing that word around?
Richard Donner for the first Superman movie. Actually, he had that word printed up on the offices to remind people, like, yes, this is a movie about a guy who can fly and bounce bullets off of him. But if you don't take it seriously, nobody will.
Oh
so
shit!
Take this shit seriously.
And that is my favorite.
Even if it's makeup fantasy
superhero.
stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
So verisimilitude is the big word.
I mean, even the Outlander series, which is about a woman who travels back in time by touching a mystic rock, even that author says she had to do extensive research on all the different time periods, on what was going on in the different parts of the world around the same times. So it is quite a hefty responsibility and an undertaking just to tell a story. And again, I'm sure that can be very discouraging for people as well, because then you get all hung up on the facts and how does this make sense in my world and for the vision that I had for it. It might completely change the vision altogether. So that's really tricky. But no, thank you. That's not for me.
To go back to your now original question on this, that started the tangent though. One of the things that fascinates me most as a place to set stories is pre-Hellenic Egypt.
Okay.
Way ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
Like, the Egypt that people like Ramses were doing archaeology on. Yeah. Like Ramses as a pharaoh was like, I need my archaeologist to tell me about what happened here in our own history, because it was so friggin' long ago.
Yeah.
I would love to tell stories set there, because that's just so like you got so many stories in Western culture talking about the Greek myths and then the Roman myths and all that sort of stuff, and it's so well known. But man, Egypt was even crazier with their myths. It was great. It was wild, and practically nobody knows about all the various rivalries between the gods and the various heroes and the rise and fall of civilizations and dynasties. And like, I would love to write a story set there. I'm a huge ancient Egypt nerd. I've got a book right here on ancient Egyptian phonology, how to pronounce ancient Egyptian, which nobody really knows the answer to, but people have made pretty good guesses about.
Wow.
But trying to write a story set there is so intimidating.
So you're not thinking about the Roman Empire. You're thinking about the Egyptian Empire. Okay.
Yeah, man. Tell me about the life of people under the pharaohs. That's what interests me. Yeah.
I think, but I mean, my dad was very much like that too. He was very fascinated by the pharaohs, by the archaeological finds and the discoveries, and what my mom and I like to refer to as like just ancient trash. Because that's basically, like we've talked about this before. My buddy lives on the third oldest property here in New Milford, and one day he had to dig up a tree stump or something, and he found this really old glass bottle, empty, whatever. And my mom's like, yeah, they didn't have a trash bag, they didn't have dumpster collection, so they dug a hole, they threw it in there. So that's that's how we look at things now. It's like all archaeology is just picking up other people's trash from hundreds, thousands of years ago. So let's pivot off of the books. Well, first of all, how do people get the books? Okay. So I know Amazon. You have a website.
Amazon and Smashwords are the two big ones.
Smashwords, okay.
Smashwords is the other place that I publish too. And Amazon will get you the Kindle version or the published on demand CreateSpace version, which is unfortunately quite expensive, largely out of my control. That's how much they cost to print them. I don't make very much on those. But at the same time, if you like, having a physical book in your hand, that's the only way to do it.
Yeah.
But those are my current available venues, and stay tuned to. Oh, you can also look them up on Goodreads, I think.
Okay.
They're there, and I think you can access where to buy them from Goodreads if you want to pursue them.
Okay.
And as far as I know, you can also ask libraries to stock them. I think that's a thing.
Yeah. Oh, that's totally a thing.
I don't know if that's
100%.
ever been done, but if folks are interested and want them in their local libraries, hey, I'm all for it.
Hey, I mean,
like I said, I'm not in this to make a buck. Make a buck. I'm in this to tell stories. So
yeah. Well, so how do we
hear
feel?
the story, the better.
How do we feel about AI these days? Because I will say, I'm a big fan. I personally prefer fantasy books to anything because I don't know how to explain it. I like being completely removed from reality. You know what I mean? Because I feel more immersed in that. I like other people's storytelling. I like other people's ideas and other people's ways of thinking. And it helps that it's orcs and fairies and dwarves rather than, some lawyer that is having a bad day or something I don't know how to explain it. But, I have recently, again, with technology, so now there are all these different apps and websites you can go on. And there was one author that I started to really get into, but I had to read all of her stories through an app. And I guess it was convenient for her because she could upload pages in real time as she's writing the stories, which on the one hand is great. But at the same time, there was no spell checking. To the point where I would be reading these stories and I'd be like, was this written by a real person or is this AI? You know what I mean? It got to a point where I was I feel like you can't just publish anything. And it's really, so I feel like things are getting trickier and trickier, where you're especially now that there are apps and all this other, it's how do I know this is a real human being behind these stories? And do you see that becoming a problem for writers? I mean, the whole actors and commercials and things like that aside, but for writers in general, is AI something that you guys concern yourselves with? Is it going to be something that could potentially be a problem? How does it affect your world, if at all?
I have very strong negative feelings about what people are calling AI. For one thing, it's not AI. There's nothing intelligent about it. It's the acronym folks should be using, but it's more of a mouthful, is LLM, large language model.
Okay.
Or in the case of things like Stable Diffusion, it's an image model, but it's still a model that is saying, okay, based on all this training data that I've got, what is the set of outputs that I should produce? And it's an interesting piece of technology, and it has good applicable uses here and there. Proofreading is actually an interesting one. You could feed a manuscript into an LLM and say, can you clean up this text for me? And it will do that. Yeah. But also human editors, if you give it to them, can look for things like, well, your tone is shifting from this paragraph to this paragraph, and your characterization is not the same. And LLM will never pick up on that because that's not what it does. So yeah, it's not hard even now for someone to use one of these things like ChatGPT or whatever and say, hey, write me a 80,000 word story about XYZ using this, and this as characters and this, and this as locations and whatever. And it'll go do it. And it won't be very good. It'll be pretty hollow. Yeah. And I think that's probably the biggest giveaway, is that what you're reading is just going to feel incredibly hollow. But guess what? There are human authors that have written hollow stuff too. So,
well, in that sense, could it be used as a writing tool? Again, for people who may have a hard time just getting started, say, hey, ChatGPT, what have you, this is my idea. This is the name of the character. This is the type of story that I want. Go. And then from there, you can fine tune it yourself using your own language and, maybe move some things around. Does that sound plausible, or is that kind of, cheating, or, how do we feel about that in those terms?
Cheating is an interesting word to use because usually I'm of the opinion that using a tool to achieve a thing is not cheating. It's just using the right tool for the job. But an LLM messes with that because it's been trained on a bunch of other people's work. So you're not you're not using like a special pencil or a particularly unique paintbrush. You're using everybody else's work.
Yeah. No matter what it won't be your
work.
voice. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So like you could, do that thing where I said, put in a prompt and get an 80,000 word story and then go through line by line and make it sound like you, maybe. But at that point, why not just write the damn thing?
Sure.
But as a tool, like you could go to something like ChatGPT and say, hey, here is my prompt. Here's a scenario that I have in mind. What are some plot twists that could come on through that? And it'll go mine its body of knowledge that it's stole from everything else and say, okay, here are 10 ideas for what to do as a plot twist. And you can look at those and go, well, those are garbage. Or you could look at it and go, maybe you get one that's like, oh, I could do something with that. Yeah. And then it inspires you to go do something else. But the point is it's an inspiration tool at that point, as opposed to a write this for me tool.
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, in that regard, I don't think it's too bad, because like I said, you still need to find your own voice, and it needs to be consistent throughout, because like you said, tonally, you can't just have one paragraph and then all of a sudden it sounds like a completely different story in the next. But it's always just really so fascinating for me, because I think as much of a tool that technology can be, I think it can also be a hindrance for a lot of people, and certainly a crutch. So I'm always curious as to, how people feel, it comes into play in what everything, what they do.
I get a lot touchier about the image stuff, like AI image generation. Like that straight up is theft, because that's just stealing a finished piece of art and sampling a section of it, averaged in with 10 other pieces of art to create another section in your generated piece of art. And man, that's just like, there's nothing to stop that. Like as an artist, like I said, I do CG animation and stuff still as a hobby, and I can't stop it. Like someone can take their AI scraper. If I want to put my image on the internet for other people to look at, there's nothing to stop them from scraping it and say, oh no, we didn't use your artwork. We generated this from many artwork. Many pieces of artwork. And just, that stuff infuriates me.
I've had so many artist friends have that very problem. And it's like you said, it's almost impossible to fight. Like, they can go to whatever website they first saw it on, but that website, like you said, can claim, oh, we got it from somewhere else. It had nothing to do with us. We didn't know, where it came from, blah, blah, blah. They can feign ignorance. But at the end of the day, you know what you're doing, please. So it's a lot to think about, gang. And again, there's so much out there. All I can say to people is, try to do your research. Try to, I see it all the time. TikTok is a big tool for a lot of people to kind of get their business out there, to advertise their shows, their programs, what have you. I still haven't even advertised the podcast on it yet, because I can't get anybody on camera with me. But I just recently saw a vendor on TikTok saying, she makes these very specific bracelets, and she's like, listen, you want to buy the cheap shit that looks kind of like mine? Great, but just know it's going to turn your arm green, and it's not the real shit. And if you guys don't want to do the research and trace it back to the actual person that is making this item, okay, that's on you. But it happens all the time, and it sucks. And I wish that there was a way to, I say that I'm not for regulations, but in certain regards I am. It's a weird problem to have right now in this world, and I don't know what the answers are or what the solutions may be. Maybe there never will be, but it's something that I think, I try to remind people to just, again, be mindful of and do your research and make sure that you're getting it from the proper source, from the direct source, if you can. I don't know.
I'll tell you this about regulation is every regulation that wasn't written to line somebody's pocket was written in blood.
There you go. Yep.
That's the big thing.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
Some of the regulations you look at and go, why is this regulation a thing? Well, because somebody died or somebody got really hurt. And so suddenly it was necessary to create that rule.
Well, so the reason the FDA was created was because Heinz ketchup didn't want competition. Right there. They
always greed, man. Follow the money.
They used to fill their sauces with sawdust, with, sand, just to, change the, the viscosity of their products. And Heinz ketchup came around and was like, hey, you know what? That guy over there is putting sawdust in their barbecue sauce, and we don't think that that's the American people shouldn't be having to, even though it had been going on for decades and they did it themselves at one point. That's how it all started. So you're absolutely. I'll tell you what. I feel like you just can't trust anybody. You can't trust anybody. You can't trust anything. It all, even if it benefits us now, like you said, it originated somewhere back in the line from somebody being greedy, trying to line their pockets, trying to get a leg up, trying to beat the competition. Reality sucks sometimes, you guys. Like, it's just like...
don't let the well, I don't want to call it I feel like such an old man saying this, but don't let the social media echo chamber convince you of that.
Yeah.
Most people are pretty good most of the time.
Yeah. I think everybody starts off with good intention. Everybody starts off with good intention for the most part.
No, there are some folks out there that had, a few switches flipped wrong early on, and now they're billionaires. That's a lot of the social strife we deal with comes from being convinced that we're more different than we are similar, and it's not actually that true. We've just been spun into a tizzy to believe that. And really, you look at the people with way too many zeros at the end of their net worth and start asking those people's questions.
Not to go off on that tangent, but I've been talking about this a lot with people, between Diddy, between Elon Musk, between I just most recently watched the Mr. McMahon documentary on Netflix and the Martha Stewart documentary. And I say to people over and over again, when those people get to a certain number, when they start getting into the multi-millions, into the billions, they no longer live in reality with the rest of us. They are no longer on the same level. They no longer see anything in the same way that we see it. Because they're not used to being told no. They're not used to being told we can't make that happen for you. They're not used to being able to just drop everything to do whatever they want at any given time. So they don't live in reality anymore. So when people are always surprised by these scandals or this outlandish shit, I'm like, really? How is this shocking to you? They don't live on the same plane as the rest of us. There is no such thing as law and order when you reach that echelon, when you reach that amount of money. It's
rules for thee, none for me.
Thank you. It just doesn't apply. And the fact that anybody is shocked by this is like wild to me. Meanwhile, we still have a Supreme Court that's like allowed to do whatever the fuck they want, and we can't kick them off the freaking. So I don't. Gang, we can go on, but
I haven't vetted these numbers, so take it with a grain of salt.
Sure.
But there's a quote here that's saying a certain billionaire who you named a moment ago has been pulling in $71 million an hour since election day.
Right.
And now thinks that the $1,900 Social Security check is too much.
Yeah.
It's like, buddy, you do not get to make that decision.
But also, here's the thing.
You don't live.
But here's the thing, right? He's a quote unquote CEO of 4 separate major companies as of right now, as far as we're aware. Wouldn't you want to put more money into the American people's pockets so that they can further buy your bullshit and put more money in your pocket? Because that's how economies work, gang. Like, I can't buy a Tesla if I don't have the money in my bank account of which to afford me one of those dumbass fucking cars.
Perpetual debt.
Oh,
you got to finance it so you're in perpetual debt. And they have even more control over what you do with your money. You're in perpetual debt? Well, why don't we do this?
We're not going to go on, but all I'm going to say is, gang, the Cybertruck is fucking dumb as shit. If any one of you buy a Cybertruck, don't listen to my fucking pod. Please don't listen to my pod if you fucking...
We were counting them as we drove for Thanksgiving. We drove to my folks and my wife's folks, and we counted every single one we saw, and we're just cackling the whole time.
I saw one.
Why would you buy one?
There's one in New York that drives around here all the time for whatever reason, and I silently flip it off in my head every time I see it. But I swear to God, there was one that I saw that was wrapped in like this iridescent, like pearlescent wrap, and I just. Tell me you have too much money and like how irresponsible you are with your money without telling me how irresponsible you are with your, like, People like that should really just be shot. They should not be a part of society because you don't benefit us in any way. You're just the worst. I just can't.
Just confiscate their assets and redistribute them to people.
I mean, I'm sure at some point it's going to happen because they're going to commit some type of tax fraud or something. I swear, these people, I cannot. In that vein, though, I do want to bring this up because I think this is it's just a fun little thing. And again, this just shows how your mind works for pretty much our entire lives. And you have written about this you've written a blog about this. Explain to my listeners, because there's always this running joke about stormtroopers, about how stormtroopers always miss every shot they take.
Okay.
Explain to my listeners why that is.
Okay. First, they don't. Most of the time you see them, they are incredibly accurate. First time you see stormtroopers ever in the history of Star Wars movies, episode 4. What do? They storm a ship, which is a held position of dug-in defenders, and win. That's the first thing we see them do.
Okay.
They lose maybe 2 or 3 guys who are not necessarily dead, because once this battle is over, you see stormtroopers checking the guys who have fallen to see, are you dead? Or are you okay?
Okay.
So that armor, again, not worthless. That's the first thing they do. Second thing we see them do, or we hear about them do, is Luke and Obi-Wan are looking at this blasted out Jawa sandcrawler, right? And Luke's like, well, look, this looks like sand people. There's gaffy sticks, there's bantha tracks. I just never heard of them hitting anything this big before. And Obi-Wan chimes in, they didn't, but we're meant to think they did. Sand people always ride single file to hide their numbers. And these blast points, too accurate for sand people. Only Imperial stormtroopers are so precise.
Oh my.
This is General Kenobi from the freaking Clone Wars of Jedi saying stormtroopers are too precise. Now then we get to the Death Star, right? Okay, this is where things start going off the rails.
Yep.
Get to the Death Star, and all of a sudden, the stormtroopers are not hitting the rebels at all. Why not? Millennium Falcon blasts off, gets away. And then the next scene, Leia says, look, it was too easy. They're clearly tracking us. And Han's like, that wasn't easy. What are you talking about? Then they cut to Tarkin and Vader, and Tarkin says, you're sure the homing beacon is secure aboard their ship? I'm taking an awful risk, Vader. He does let them get away so he can track them to the rebel base. That's the whole point of how come the stormtroopers keep missing and possibly throwing their lives away while these rebels are shooting at them, because they're trying to get them to convince them that this is their escape and they're getting away.
Yeah.
And now we know exactly where they're going and go blow up their base. Next time we see stormtroopers, Empire Strikes Back. They curb stomp the rebel resistance. Just absolute smash them. Next time we see them, Bespin. Immediately capture all the rebels in a surprise attack. Oh, and then the rebels get away because the hyperdrive had already been disabled on the Millennium Falcon. And if R2 hadn't been there, they would have just recaptured the ship again. It was a ploy once more that happened to backfire because R2-D2 is a mechanical fucking genius.
Yeah, he's the best.
All right. Now, the pièce de résistance. Return of the Jedi. The Ewok Uprising. The Ewoks, who earlier in the movie had also captured the rebel commandos that were trying to infiltrate the moon, who were prepared to eat them. Let's not forget that. They were starting a fire to eat them, to cook them and eat them, who had set up traps on this moon, or this planet with giant trees that presumably have predators that they have to fight against. And actually that gets confirmed in a spin-off movie, but that's beside the point. And are still losing initially during the Battle of Endor. Go back and watch. They're still losing. They're dying left and right until, not the Ewoks, but Chewbacca with the Ewoks commandeers one of the walkers and turns the tide of battle. AKA Imperial hardware against Imperial hardware is what turns the battle there. Get out of here with the stormtroopers can't.
Well, again, because you're the only person that's ever put it in an explanation that makes sense to me. So I wanted to get that on the pod. I wanted to get that out there. Now let's pivot completely, because Micron Steve we've had this issue too. Micron Steve has argued this, friend of the show. He's been on a couple of times now. He believes Thanos is right, that population is taking over. It's too much. We need to thin the herd. You have said historically, and I don't know if you still feel this way, you have said it provided every piece of land was inhabitable, we would be spread out more. We wouldn't be so on top of each other. We wouldn't have these big, giant, mega cities with billions of people living within a 100-mile radius of one another. So it wouldn't be the problem that we have today. Do you still feel that way, or are you starting to kind of feel that Thanos might be a little right, a little bit?
So there's two problems with Thanos' approach. The first, it's if you half everything, half the population of everything, it's just going to come back. It's going to double again. It's just going to keep that like that. That's a temporary solution that maybe buys you some respite.
Yeah.
But it doesn't sustain. That's right. Unless there's been societal behavioral level change to say, no, whatever we were doing before wasn't sustainable. But to do that, you'd have to have Thanos actually being in charge and communicating, as opposed to fucking off to his own little planet and saying, I've done my job by killing half of everything.
Right.
No, you haven't. You haven't done anything but delay what you just were upset about. But the second thing is we don't have a resource problem, at least here on Earth right now, today, for real. We don't have a resource problem. We have a distribution problem. Earth has so many resources. We have so much everything.
Well, and both China and Japan have just proved that. Have you heard that craziness with China and Japan? Holy cow. China's sitting on gold. Rare earth stuff or something else? Yes, Japan just found the whole rare earth cache, and now China is sitting on a mountain of gold. So that's going to completely change the landscape very soon as far as the industrial powers are concerned. But yes, continue on.
Well, so just like, it's a distribution problem in the sense that it's also distribution, including deployment of things. Like, we get so much sunlight on Earth. If we had the capacity to distribute solar power to all of these places, to solar collection and then power to all the places that need it, there would not be a power crunch. There wouldn't be a need for fossil fuels in the least. We just wouldn't need it.
I don't understand how every parking lot across the globe does not have solar panels covering it. I don't understand. You wouldn't have to plow when it snows. You have to build them and then
you have to deploy them.
You wouldn't have to plow when it snows. People wouldn't be, vying for the perfect parking space because the sun is bearing down, so they're trying to find a tree or they're trying to find a parking garage. It would solve so many other problems. Why is people start fucking doing these things?
Distribution, money. So money is the other, I guess, the third thing really. It goes back to not to sound like I'm beating a dead horse or fall into an archetype or a stereotype, but it's the entire concept of a billionaire class is directly contrary to making progress as a society.
Yes.
Like, millionaire, if you make a millionaire, that's a totally achievable thing that someone could do by like coming up with a cool product or starting a cool business or whatever. Even, double millionaire, not double, 10 millionaire, 20 millionaire, whatever. That's still reasonable. You can't get to the 100 or 100 millionaire threshold and above without exploiting somebody.
Yeah, without
exploiting a lot
over.
of somebody.
Yeah.
Or without damaging the world in some capacity.
I've always felt that we should have a cap on it. Like maybe the most you can, to be fair to the millionaires, to the elite, maybe the most you could ever make is $1 billion. After $1 billion, that immediately goes back into the economy or to your local whatever the fuck. Like, kind of like how Canada does with maple syrup. You can only make so much maple syrup, then we're going to need the extra maple syrup that you've got. Why can't we do that with money? You still are rich as fuck. You're still richer than the majority of us will ever fucking be. You know what? Throw a little
Liz,
back.
That sounds an awful lot like a progressive tax.
Jesus Christ,
Weird.
heaven. But you know what? Like, that would solve the tax conversation too. Okay, you don't have to pay taxes. Just give us the little extra that you make over here. Just get, Taylor Swift made $2.1 billion on the fucking tour or whatever. Give us the 0.1. You don't need the 0.1 at this point when you've got the 2. What are you doing with the 0.1? You're not even thinking about the 0.1. Give us the 0.1. You know what I'm like? Come on now. But the thing is, Taylor will give us the 0.1 and she'll still be shit on for it. So what the fuck? I can't. But I wanted to have these conversations with you because I felt that you could put them in a very succinct way. And, it still makes my blood boil regardless. It's not your fault, but
mine too, man.
But again, these are things that we think about. And even in our little sci-fi, fantasy, Marvel, Star Wars worlds, it all still applies back to reality. Thank you. He's wearing a Venom shirt. I've got my Ghostbusters shirt on. I almost wore an X-Men shirt for you today. I almost did. But, well, hey, okay, for a second, we're going long now. I knew this was going to happen. Just for you and me, for S&Gs, how are we feeling about things in the Marvel Cinematic Universe these days?
Pretty good.
You're still a Marvel.
They've been getting a lot of flack.
I know you like both, but you're still more of a Marvel stan, like myself, than DC.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I enjoy DC, but I'm not a DC guy.
Thank you. Exactly.
I enjoy Batman. I enjoy Superman. Hell, I enjoyed the Aquaman movies. I thought they were fun.
No, Ryan.
But
no,
I thought they were fun.
Not the first one. The first one's absolute trash.
Which one am I thinking of?
They're both very upsetting. But no, okay.
The one where they got Mary Poppins. Oh, what's her name?
Oh, that's Guardians.
They got her. No.
Oh.
They got her to voice the creature that he has to go get the trident from, or something like that. I thought that was hysterical.
That's terrible, actually. That's very upsetting me. That's funny though. Yeah, I can't. I can't with DC.
Hey, that's fair.
But again, now that James Gunn is at the helm, it's a different. Yes, Creature Commandos is great. Peacemaker is great. The Batman is my favorite right now, aside from Michael Keaton. The Penguin is amazing. I highly recommend everybody watch The Penguin, because I've been historically saying it's not a comic book show, it's a mafioso show. So if you like The Sopranos, you'll love The Penguin. So go see that. But yeah, okay. But Marvel.
Anyway, Marvel.
Yeah, they're having a moment right now. They're having a moment.
Well, they had the same moment we all did. They had COVID, and COVID absolutely.
But no. Now everybody's. You can't blame COVID anymore. COVID's over. You can't.
I mean, we're talking about movies. We're talking about movies that take a year or two to make.
Thank you.
And that's going to have ripple effects for a while.
Thank you.
And man, the worst thing ever happened. One of the planned faces for their thing, died.
Yep.
Chadwick Boseman died, man. He was going to be like one of the key figures of the next successor group after, Iron Man and Captain America and all that.
And then the next guy got arrested. So, yeah, things are...
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it's a little rough.
But, it's only been 4 years, almost 5 years now, since COVID. And, realize that each movie takes 2 years to make, roughly. And they've got to plan these things out. And they, in that sequence, had COVID disrupt their release schedule, and then had one of their main guys die, and then had another guy get arrested, as you said. I mean, I'm cutting them a lot of slack personally. I think I think they realize where they have misstepped, and I think they are gonna try to come around on that. And
it's a breath of fresh air talking to you, because so with the YouTube show, we focus mainly on DC projects. So Marvel gets shit on often by the DC stans. So I needed this. I need this reset. I need this breath of fresh air. I need somebody on my side here. So I do appreciate that. How do you feel about RDJ coming back for Doctor Doom?
How I feel about that is going to depend entirely on what that means.
Yes.
Like until I see how it manifests, I'm going to hold
because
judgment.
They just my whole thing is, regardless of who's in it, they have yet to give us a decent Fantastic Four. So if they give me a decent Fantastic Four, I could give a fuck who's in it. I don't care. Also, now that we know Chris Evans is going to make an appearance in this latest as well. First, I thought he was coming back as Johnny Storm, because they can't do that to Anthony Mackie. They can't bring him back as Cap. That's just not right. It's not fair. And Anthony Mackie is going to be in this as well as Cap. So first, I thought he was coming back as an iteration of Johnny Storm, like it was another multiverse thing where they reconnect or some shit. Or
that would be funny.
But now fans are thinking he could be Captain Hydra, which I think would be pretty wild.
I've seen that.
And I think, because again, he would kind of be along the same lines as RDJ. He's coming in as a completely different character. He's coming in as a completely different. And I think from an actor's standpoint, if I were Chris Evans, I'd be like, yeah, that's how you're getting me back, is something completely different that I've never done before. Let me have some fun with it. What are your thoughts? Not that anybody listening knows who we're talking about.
It could also be that they knew that was going to get out, that he was going to be in it, and it's really going to be one or two scenes of him playing old man Steve Rogers up on the moon or wherever he's supposed to have been.
I was also thinking that as well.
It's possible they're just going to do that.
Yeah, I was also thinking that maybe it would be a flashback that Anthony Mackie was having of like a conversation the two of them were having, you know, about passing the torch or something he remembered from their training days, what have you. I was also thinking along those lines as well. So again, thank you. I needed this conversation. I really do appreciate you.
The other thing that I've seen that's fascinating, kind of along the same lines as the Captain Hydra thing, one of the speculations I've seen about RDJ is this Tony Stark we've been following this whole time is himself actually a Doom variant as opposed to Doom being a Stark variant.
I've seen that as well. Yes.
And so, you know, that could be an interesting way to play it. Yes. And it's like, no. It's not that Doom is a variant of Stark. It's that Stark was a variant of Doom.
Yes.
And your reality didn't have one, and now it will because of Fantastic Four.
As annoyed as I get with multiverse, and Star Trek started this, let's be fair, as upsetting as I get with the multiverse, and I feel like everybody uses that as a catch-all, as a cure-all, we can do whatever we want because multiverse. I do like it because I feel like, you know, I don't know, maybe Star Wars needs to start with a multiverse because they're in some kind of slump right now too. People are just sick of Star Wars. You still do get
Skeleton Crew so far has been great.
I have that's you know what, to be fair, yes.
It's I had such a low level of expectation for it. I'm like,
yes.
This is going to be
to
bad.
be fair, I have heard really good things, so that's fair.
It's
that's
quite.
Fair.
I went in thinking I'm probably not going to like this, and I got to the first episode like, all right, what you got next? Next episode, okay, what you got next? Right. Third episode, like, all right, I got to admit I like this show. Yeah. What can I say?
that is fair. I have heard really good things, but you know, so as much as I hate the multiverse as an excuse, it is a great creative tool. It is a great way to kind of reset, to introduce new characters, to introduce new storylines and new ideas so that it's not the same stagnant. I mean, James Gunn historically keeps saying, now that he is head of DC and all these creative projects and everything he's greenlighting, he has said time and time again, we're never going to fucking get another Batman origin story. We're never going to get another Superman origin story. We fucking know. We know how these guys came about. Even talking about Swamp Thing, he's saying you're not going to get an origin story because A, it's really not that relevant to the overall, you know, story of this guy, of this character, and B, you done been there, saw that, heard it, don't need to do it again. And that's all we keep doing, is we keep going back to the same well. So in that regard, I'm really excited about what James has to do because I know he is such a true fan. Oh my God. Okay. You guys, sorry. Seriously, I'm going to have to get off the chat, but one last thing. Sorry, you guys, I'm so nerdy. We never get this chance, you guys. And again, nobody knows what we're talking about at this point. Henry Cavill has greenlit his Warhammer project. Mm-hmm. I have said on the YouTube show that I think no matter what, this is horrible. This is horrible for him because here's the thing. Either they're not going to let him do exactly what he wants. Now, this has been his lifelong fandom, you guys. And even if you don't know what Warhammer is, he has cared about this world. He has cared about these stories. He has cared about these characters his entire life. This was what kind of got him into all of the fandom that he is a part of today. Okay. So here's the thing. Either he gets to do exactly what he wants, and people who know nothing about Warhammer are going to see whatever this project is, and they're going to tear him to shreds because they're not going to understand it. So that sucks. Or he's going to be given the green light, and then the studio is going to turn around and be like, you can't do X, Y, and Z. And they're going to limit him so much, and they're going to edit it to death, and they're going to shred it to pieces that the fans are going to go, what the fuck, Henry? Like, I thought you were a part of this world. I thought you cared. I thought you know, clearly this is just a cash grab for you. Like, no matter what, I don't see this ending well for him. And it bums me out because human beings are the worst. The internet sucks. Like, you know, like I saw it like with Dune, for example, right? After the first Dune film came out, well, I should say the most recent iterations, the most recent Dune films. After the first film came out, somebody was like, I didn't get it hated it. It was really long. Yeah, because you don't understand. There are 6 fucking books. There are 6 huge fucking books. So they had a limited amount of time to tell as much of the story as they possibly could, because they had already said 6 films is 6 too many. We can't do 6 films. So like, if you, and I said this again about Twilight, same thing with Twilight. When you go see Twilight, there's a scene in the final film that is not in the book, but it's because one of the characters has visions. She saw a version of the future that could potentially happen. People who did not read the books lost their fucking minds when that scene happened, because, oh my God, people are dying. And no. It's a vision. You need to read the book and do some research. So you know what I'm saying? Like, no matter what, you're never going to be able to please everybody, because nobody's going to sit down and do the research and care about it the way you care about it. So when I hear somebody like Henry Cavill gets the green light for a passion project about something that means so very much to him, that he's been a part of for the better part of 30 some odd years, I immediately think gloom and doom, and oh my God, I feel so bad for him, because because people are terrible. You can't put things you love out into the world. It's awful.
Hey, I mean, I did.
That's right. True. And it's so good, though. It is so good. But
I think the first scenario is more likely than the second.
That they're not going to let him do what he wants.
Exactly what he. No. That he is going to get to do exactly what he wants, and people are going to bounce off of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I don't think the second is as likely, simply because of his experience on The Witcher. Because
people weren't happy with that either,
clashed.
Though. Yeah.
Well,
the people who read the books were not happy with how it came out.
That may or may not have anything to do with him, though.
Well, no, that's very true.
I think
absolutely.
There was a lot of stuff with the showrunners and Henry were clashing over many things, and I don't know specifically over what they were clashing.
He was so hot, though, you guys. Just for the eye candy, watch that show. Jesus Christ. Anyway, not that matters to you.
I have read all of the Witcher books. Yeah. I have played all of the Witcher games.
Nice.
I am a big fan of that world, and I thought Henry did a great job.
Yes.
So hot. Have some questions about why some show decisions were made, but I'm not a purist about the stories to the point where I'm like, well, you can't change it.
Yeah, that's who I'm talking about, is these freaking purists. Oh my God. Yeah.
But you can, there were still, even if in the context of, make some changes to make the show play better, or, if you want to put a spin on it, or develop an idea that you maybe, read into a passage in the book or the game or whatever.
Yeah.
Go ahead, experiment, play around, but also do it right. Like, do it well, do a good job at it, make it good storytelling still. And there were some missteps, I think. But I mean, they've said Liam Hemsworth is going to come back as Geralt for season 4, and I'm going to watch it. See how he does.
To be fair, I have not caught up. I have not watched him in season 3, so I can't pass. I enjoy Liam. I don't have a problem with Liam.
Wait, is it season 3? They're coming back?
He came in in season 3. So which I don't know, has that been out yet or not? I don't know. But
I don't actually.
But again, here's the thing too. I feel like there's been such a gap that like nobody's going to get back into it, regardless of whether or not they support the change in actor. You can't leave fans hanging like that. But okay, so let's wrap this up. But I will say, for you, do you have any interest in your books becoming shows or movies? Could that potentially happen one day? I can totally see it. 100%.
I mean, I think the next horizon for the books is something I've played with a little bit, and that's just making an audiobook version, because I know a lot of folks like audiobooks as opposed to reading on a page. So I've actually experimented with how good a recording I can make of myself just reading the book.
Right.
Because then I can do my own voices for my characters and stuff.
Cute. I love it.
Make it a little bit of a dramatization.
Yeah, it's fun.
But I think, well, I don't know if that's true of any author, but I think someone who is who delights in all forms of media the way I do, would always love an opportunity to adapt it to some other form. And I don't know that, I don't have preconceptions about whether or not a show or a movie would be a better format for the books. If anybody out there is listening and wants to send me an option deal, I'll be happy to entertain your request and consider.
Yeah. Hell yeah. Let's make it happen.
Kind of like the Henry Cavill thing. I would I don't have a lot of any kind of clout to throw around other than being the rights holder, but I would want to have some creative say.
Of course,
like,
yeah.
Wait a minute. I get what we're going with this, and it's cool to have new ideas and try things out and change stuff, but also you're getting away from what this is about.
Yeah. And like, you can't make Fitton hot. Like, you can't make Fitton hot. Like, he can't be, Henry Cavill can't play him with abs.
You could make living Fenton in the past if you wanted to adapt his like Bash. You could make him hot. That's fine. And we actually get into that a little bit in book 3.
There you go. Do we have a title for book 3? You don't have to if you don't want to, but
we do. It's going to stay under wraps, but you can probably infer what it's going to be if the first book was Ashes and the second book was Embers.
Yes. Okay.
So you could probably infer what the third title is going to be.
Okay.
But I don't have any planned date for it yet. I'm debating whether or not it makes sense to give myself one, or if that's just going to shoot myself in the foot and give me something to the deadline flies
just
right
give
by.
you anxiety, right?
Yeah. So it is. I can say that it's 2/3 of the way done.
Excellent.
Roughly, based on the amount of story that I've written versus amount of story I have left to write, and that the last third should be the easiest third because it's the third that's been in my head since way back.
Right.
But I think that's also the problem. It's like, okay, well, I already know what that's going to be. So, like I said, way earlier on, it's like that. Where's the motivation to do it? Because I already know what it is.
Right. Well, I'm looking forward to it. So again, guys, this was Ryan McClure, author of Ashes of Allur-tan and Embers of Allur-tan. Please pick them up on Amazon. Again, you can get it through your Kindle as well. And then what was the other one you said? Smash words. Okay. But as always, guys, this was Try Not to Curse. Ryan, thank you so much for being with us. And you guys, thank
you so much for having me. It's great to talk to you.
I knew we were going on this tangent. I knew it was happening. But we will catch you guys next time.